My boss asked me to train my replacement, without telling me I was being fired. I guess it's my turn to share one of those workplace horror stories that make you seriously question how people like this end up in management positions. This happened to me about a year ago, but the bitterness still hasn't worn off. I've always been the type to go above and beyond at work. The guy who takes on extra shifts, helps train the new hires, even bakes cookies for the office from time to time. And somehow, this is how I got thanked. I worked in logistics for a mid-sized supply chain company. You know the kind, always streamlining, restructuring, or reevaluating the budget. I'd been there almost 6 years, never had a write-up, always got my performance bonuses, even one employee of the quarter once. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, or so I thought. In late fall, my manager, Rob, let's call him Rob, because that jackass deserves to be named something boring, pulled me into his office for what he called a development opportunity. "We want you to help onboard a new hire," he said. "She'll be joining the department next week. You've got the best process documentation, and we want her to learn from the best." Now, I'm not dumb. This wasn't the first time I'd trained someone, but something about the way he said it rubbed me the wrong way. "Sure," I said, "happy to help. What's her role going to be?" He hesitated, just for a second, then said, "Pretty similar to yours." "Pretty similar to mine. Okay, weird. We weren't expanding the team. In fact, there had been budget cuts. But I figured maybe they were finally letting me shift into the senior analyst role I'd been gunning for. Spoiler alert, they weren't. A week later, Ashley shows up, mid-20s, fresh out of her MBA program, bright and eager. And look, she was great. This wasn't her fault. But the job they told her she was taking over, my exact job title, my exact responsibilities, my access levels, even my desk, which she mentioned was super close to the printer, so she was excited about that. Like, girl, please. I asked Rob about it point blank. "Hey, just so I understand, am I moving departments?" "We're still evaluating some things," he said. "Focus on making sure Ashley gets up to speed." My stomach dropped. That was the moment I knew. They were pushing me out. So for the next 2 weeks, I played along. I trained Ashley, gave her all the process manuals, walked her through the software, sat in on meetings so she'd learn the dynamics, all while secretly updating my resume and reaching out to recruiters. Then came the Friday. Rob called me in again, face all business. "Due to restructuring, your position has been eliminated," he said, like he was reading off a cue card. "But the position still exists," I said. "Ashley is doing it." He blinked. "It's been repurposed." "So you had me train my own replacement, without telling me." Silence. Then he said, "We appreciate your professionalism. You'll receive 2 weeks of severance." 2 weeks. 6 years and 2 weeks, that was my thank you. I stood up, laughed because if I didn't, I'd have screamed and walked out. No rage quitting, no smashing monitors, just left, took my dignity with me at least. The silver lining? I had already accepted a new position earlier that week. Higher pay, better culture, remote work. I didn't even need their severance, but I made sure to collect it anyway. About a month later, a former coworker texted me. Ashley quit, said the systems were too complicated and she didn't feel supported. Rob's freaking out. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. But here's the thing. The job I took, it wasn't just better, it was transformative. I was finally part of a team that respected each other, where leaders actually led instead of just covering their own asses. My new manager encouraged transparency. When I told them this story, they shook their head and said, that kind of mismanagement is why people leave entire industries. I learned something crucial. Being loyal to a company doesn't mean the company will be loyal to you. And it's not bitterness, it's reality. I spent so much time proving my value to people who had no intention of valuing me. One day at my new job, I was sitting in a planning meeting, brainstorming ideas with leadership, and one of them turned to me and said, "You're really good at thinking around corners. We should be leaning on you more," and I nearly choked up. It had been years since I'd felt truly seen at work. Meanwhile, I kept hearing updates about my old team. Rob tried to juggle multiple roles after Ashley bailed. They brought in a temp who didn't even last 2 weeks. The system documentation I'd built, they lost track of it because it was all on my personal drive. Rob never had the foresight to back it up. Beautiful chaos. What really stuck with me, though, was how hard I had to work just to keep pretending everything was okay in those final weeks. There's a kind of professional gaslighting that happens in toxic environments, where your instincts scream at you that something's off, but everyone smiles and says you're imagining it. In hindsight, there were signs all along: the slowly shrinking responsibilities, the exclusion from meetings I used to lead, Rob brushing off my suggestions with lines like, "Let's just focus on execution for now." I'd been phased out gradually, so by the time they pulled the trigger, they figured I wouldn't fight it. But I did fight back, in my own way. I took all the skills I'd sharpened at that job and used them to land something better. I took every bit of resentment and funneled it into becoming more strategic about my career. I started mentoring younger professionals online, warning them to trust their gut and recognize red flags early. Eventually, I got to attend a conference hosted by a competitor of my old company. It was a surreal moment, standing in a room with professionals I respected, representing a new company that valued me, speaking on a panel about ethical leadership. I even spotted a former colleague in the crowd who came up afterward and said, "Man, you really leveled up." That comment stuck with me, because I didn't just survive being blindsided, I used it as fuel. I used to think loyalty was a virtue in and of itself. Now I know it has to be mutual to matter. I also started writing. Not just rants on Reddit, but career pieces, guides on navigating office politics, surviving layoffs, building soft skills. One of those posts got shared by a pretty big industry leader on LinkedIn, and suddenly I had DMs from people asking if I did coaching. Crazy how getting fired can actually launch you. What's more ironic is that Rob ended up getting demoted after a string of poor decisions, no surprise there, and rumor has it he's now reporting to someone he used to micromanage. That's corporate karma. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just accepted things as they were, if I'd stayed quiet, trained Ashley, and walked away with my head down. But I didn't, and now I'm in a better place, mentally, financially, professionally. If you're in a situation where things feel off, trust that instinct. Don't wait for a meeting to confirm your gut feeling. Start planning your escape early, and when you leave, don't just survive, thrive. If you found this story maddening, relatable, or just plain wild, don't forget to hit subscribe. We bring you real-life workplace betrayals, corporate absurdities, and personal stories from people just like you every single week. Smash that like button, turn on notifications, and stick with us for more of the internet's most jaw-dropping stories of survival, revenge, and petty justice. Your voice matters. Share your story in the comments, and maybe we'll feature it next.